I would like to welcome you once again for today's webinar on menstrual leave. It's part of a series on employee wellness because when it comes to staff wellness at the workplace, we don't just want to consider the financial well-being of the employee, but employees are people. The people that as an employer you're working with, your staff members, they are human beings, and there are issues that concern them that go beyond their everyday work life, that goes beyond delivering and meeting deadlines. They're human beings, and a human being has so much aspects to them. Like, I think if you have been following our webinars, we have done even webinars on a webinar on mental health at the workplace. So we like to bring people to this conversation of looking at employment from a wholesome perspective. And today's webinar is part of that series. And before we go into the matter or the marrow of what menstrual leave is all about and looking at how other jurisdictions have applied it, would like to give it some context. And if you are a woman here, I don't know how many women are in this webinar. I can see most of us are women, actually. Yes, there's one man here. Great, it's good to see men here. Hopefully, it's a man, and it's not just a lady who has just logged in using a device with a gentleman's name. But if you are a woman, you understand that time of the month when your body decides it's going to give you, what do I call it? For some people, it's even a harrowing experience. It's part of the biological makeup as a woman. It's part of who we are. And there's that time of the month where you're going through your menstrual period. And for some people, it's a very, very, very difficult season. And I hear some women say that for some people, their menses, their menstrual period is even more painful than labor pains. You can imagine. If you're a gentleman here, I don't think you may really understand what a woman goes through. And when they're talking about cramps, you may not have a proper appreciation of what it feels like because you have not experienced it firsthand. But I can tell you for sure, for women who experience painful cramps, it's quite a difficult period. And for some people, when it comes to their menstrual periods, it comes with sickness. Like, it manifests differently for different people. But generally, the woman is unwell. I know people who can't leave their bed. I know people who have to be admitted in hospital. Yeah, in hospital. When I was in high school, there was a lady who, during her periods, she was admitted in the school sanatorium for the entire 4 days. She couldn't do anything. She couldn't go to class. She couldn't do anything. And maybe your story is not as severe as that. And as you know, also, there are some conditions that are also related with the menstrual cycles of women. If you are here in our last webinar, I think last week on Tuesday, we were talking about endometriosis. That's another condition that is associated with very, very painful menstruation. So for different people, it manifests differently. There are people who they just throw up the entire time. They can't eat anything. So it's a very difficult period. And the bottom of it is that, biologically speaking, even just mentally speaking, the woman can be considered sick. Okay. And the question is, you are an employee in a workplace. Your employer expects you to be at work every day. Of course, you will not, in your employment contract, there's nothing that says that 4 days every month you're going to be undergoing your menstrual period, and for that period of time, the employer is supposed to understand that you are not in a position to work. You are not physically fit to work. That is not in your employment contract. It's not a conversation that your employer will have with you when they're bringing you on board. At the point of signing that contract, you don't have that conversation with your employer, but it happens nonetheless. And the question is, so how should the law address this gap? Okay, and before now we get into how the law can address that gap, let's first look at the gap itself. Okay, so as I was saying, every at least four days of a woman's monthly cycle, they're going to experience their menstrual period. And with the biological pain that comes with it, the physical pain that comes with it, and the sickness that comes with it, how is it accommodated within the employer-employee relationship? Okay. Now, when you look at our laws, I want us to get the Kenyan context so that you get to understand why it is important that we have this conversation, especially within the Kenyan space, because we start from home, right? So in the Kenyan law, there's nothing like menstrual leave, but there's something the law provides for sick leave. Okay, so under Section 30 of the Employment Act, we have provision for sick leave. But I want us to examine this sick leave so that we see whether it is really adequate to cater for a woman who is going through a very excruciating pain, a woman who has to be on bed rest for 4 days every month. According to the Employment Act, first of all, sick leave, for you to be entitled to sick leave, according to the law, okay, you need to have worked in that under that employer or be in service for at least 2 consecutive months. So if you have just been an employer for, if you've just been an employee for just 1 month, you have still not met the threshold for being entitled to sick leave. Well, probably maybe because we are human beings, your employer is a human being. Maybe you're an employee here as well. You're a human being. If someone is sick and they have not finished 2 months, you're a human being. You'll be compassionate and you may just allow them to go on a sick off. But the legal provision, the legal framework, if we were to go strictly by the law, you are only entitled to sick leave if you've worked for at least 2 months. So when you work for less than 1 month, under the law, even if your employer is going to give you an off, that will not be considered sick leave. All right. Now, this sick leave, again, according to Section 30 of the Employment Act, is for a maximum of 14 days within a period of 1 year. So within a period of 12 months, you are entitled first to 7 days of sick leave with full pay, okay? So if you get sick and you need to take a sick leave, you are entitled to 7 full days with full pay. Then after that, if you still need to take extra days for sick leave, now the rest will be 7 days, but with half pay. So now I want you to think about it. If we are saying that me as a woman, at least every 4 days, for every month, I'm going through my menstrual period and I'm technically sick. Do those 14 days, let me call them 14 days, do they accommodate my menstrual sickness? If I would call it menstrual sickness. Do they accommodate my menstrual period? So let's even be a little bit, let's be, what's the word? Moderate and reduce them to 2 days, because you might not be in a very painful situation for the whole of the 4 days of your menstrual periods. But let's say for the first 2 days, you're really not in a position to work. So even if you were to work with 2 days, 1 year has 12 months. Those are 24 days in a year. So for 24 days in a year, you're sick because you're in your periods. That cannot be accommodated within the statutory 14 days that are provided for sick leave. So that's the gap. That's the gap. Because we cannot be blind to the fact that This is something women go through. We cannot ignore that. And the purpose of the law is the object, let me say, the object of the law are people, human beings. The law is to better the welfare of human beings. It's for us. The law is for us. So why we're having this conversation is to bring to the forefront this conversation on how the law can come in to ensure that the well-being of women at the workplace is well taken care of. Because we say in law that the law is the tool for social engineering. So with that brief background, which provides us context for this discussion, I would like now to hand it over to my colleague Becky, who is going to take us through the meat of what menstrual leave looks like in other jurisdictions. And then we can see how we can borrow that and apply it in the Kenyan context. And it's also a call for all of us after we have listened to this webinar. It's a call for all of us to advocate for that. In whatever space you are, you be an advocate for that, because for laws to be enacted, there has to be someone who initiates that conversation. Okay, so ladies and the gentlemen who might be on the platform, I hope you enjoy the rest part of the webinar. Thank you.
Good afternoon to everybody on board. First and foremost, I'd like to say welcome and thank you so much for setting some time aside to just listen to this insightful conversation and give your input, because we'll allow you to comment in the chat box or ask questions, and it's just going to be a very insightful webinar. My name is Becky Njagi, and I'm excited and honored to take up some time of yours this afternoon to discuss this very interesting, I call it interesting because this topic even has myths and misconceptions to it. So it's very interesting, very exciting, definitely, and above all else, very informative. So I'm one to take things from a low scale, just going up. So we'll start as if we are in nursery. We'll start by understanding the meaning of terms as we, progress further. So the title to today's webinar is Balancing Employee Wellbeing and Workplace Productivity. And I know most of you are wondering, it's a law firm. Why is a law firm convening a webinar as regards health or menstruation? This should be, convened by hospital, nurses, doctors, and all that. But I think we need to understand that in law, we have labor law and employment law that, talks about employees, employer-employee relationships, as well as health law and medical law, right? So this is why a law firm is convening this conversation. So what is menstruation? So menstruation is a process in which the uterus sheds blood and tissue through the vagina. And I want us to understand that this is a very natural process. By natural, it means it's beyond us, right? I'm stressing on these points because you'll see their correlation as we progress. And for most women and girls, it ranges from 2 to 5 days. However, this varies in different individuals. And I think you've heard people say, she don't have menses, so she's moody, or you hear women saying, I have my cravings, it's the hormones, So I want us to understand that there are hormones that come into play, and these hormones bring forth even larger issues or concerns that relate to menstruation. So these are progesterone and estrogen. So how is menstruation related to human rights? And I'll stress on one aspect of human rights, and one article of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, which is Article 28, as regards human dignity. All over the media, for the longest time, we've seen girls from underprivileged societies or just poor women and girls who can't afford sanitary towels, having to sit in the sand and waiting for the sand to soak up, the menstrual blood. And I just want us to just think about that. Doesn't that undermine human dignity? I'd like to believe it does. If not that, places where there's no access to water or there's very severe water shortage, during this time of the month, we like to make sure we are cleaned up because it's not a very, if we're to be honest, it's a somewhat growth, situation or a growth process, So these girls, these young women and girls can't even access water to clean up. So you can imagine having to, you have to stay with the mess until, I don't even know, until something happens to it, maybe it dries up or something. And this undermines human dignity. So this is why we had to, the outline is basically everything that we'll be discussing. So I don't see the need to just read them out for you because as we progress by slide, we'll go through them in depth to make sure everybody understands. So we were here, we introduced what menstruation is, and we said it's a natural process, and some women have them for 2 to 5 days. But this varies, from every individual. And we said it's triggered by hormones. And I outlined the two hormones, that is progesterone and estrogen. Yeah. And now I skipped the topic of what menstrual leave is because that is the star of the show, right? So we've already related menstruation to human rights, and we said it's it's very intrinsically related to human rights, and that is under Article 28 of the Constitution of Kenya as regards human dignity. So now to our survey show, what is menstrual leave? So it's a type of leave where a person may have the option of taking either paid or unpaid leave from their employment if they're menstruating and are unable to go to work because of this. So I know you have two questions. It means how you're unable to go to work because of this. What do you mean paid or unpaid? As you continue this conversation, you realize that there are nations, there are countries who have, who are very sensitized on this topic, that they've even, allowed for their female, counterparts in the industry to be allocated paid leave while others have unpaid leave. But at least, they honor the concept of menstrual leave. So let's proceed. Now, a historical concept. While I was reading this, I found this to be very interesting because not in my wildest thoughts would I ever think, that we were that behind. Because we've had so many activists in Kenya, so many advocates for women and girls, for menstrual health, for sexual health, reproductive health, who have been coming forward over the years, yet there's close to no progress as regards, menstrual leave or just menstruation as a whole. So let's look at the historical concept. So it was first, this concept of menstrual leave was first applied, in certain sectors, job sectors in Russia. And then in 2017, this policy was now enacted strongly and fully because of the resulting discrimination against female workers. And I'm not going to delve into this right now because we'll have a slide or a session where we talk about the challenges, that have been posed against menstrual leave that have made it just a nightmare to, put it out there concretely. So as early as 1912, guys, the year is 1912, a girls' school in South India, in state of Kerala, had granted students menstrual leave. They think this is just beyond amazing because it means the individuals of that very school, the teachers, both male and female, took their time to understand how painful or how dire a topic or how dire menstruation as a topic is, that they decided to grant their students menstrual leave. I'll just delve into this in a few minutes. Then in 1920, a Japanese labor union started to demand leave for their female workers. You can tell it's Japanese labor union. So it's a society of both men men and women. And this is just very inspiring because it means the men have also been sensitized as regards menstruation and how serious it can get. Okay. And in 1947, a law was brought into force for the Japanese labor standards that allowed menstruating women to take leave off work because it is a dire situation, guys. If we're going to dwell into it just shortly, and you realize during this time of the month, women are actually just superheroes, to say the least. They show up and they show out despite how painful their menses could be, the cramps could be, the headaches could be, okay? Or just how, the whole process or how overwhelming it is. I now want to make us understand why we talked about hormones, why we've talked about, even schools saying this as a very serious topic, that they had to allow their students some time, the female students some time from school when they're on their period. Guys, forgive me, I am very old school. Sometimes I really prefer, actually most times I prefer to write things down for easy, understanding. Now, I want us to ask ourselves this question. Does menstruation limit what people can do? Women are strong, we call ourselves strong women, the strength of a woman. But when it is at that time of the month, it's sometimes too much. It's too overwhelming for us. So I asked myself this question and I concluded with this answer. To some extent, menstruation can limit what a woman or what a girl can do. And I have my 5 to 6 reasons why. Number one, have you been in a school setting, in class or at work, and you realize that your classmate or your deskmate is in so much pain? You just mostly see them like this. Allow me to even demonstrate. They're in so much pain. It's the cramps. And maybe you hear them say, I went to my gynecologist and she told me I have dysmenorrhea. You wonder, what is that? Dysmenorrhea is extremely painful periods or cramps. It could be back pain, pelvic, or abdominal pain. Now, can you imagine forcing such an individual to come to work? There is no allowance for in case you're not feeling okay, or in case it's too overwhelming for you. You can opt not to come to work, or you can opt not to come to class. Because such an individual who's going through extremely painful periods or cramp, mind you, periods will take 2 to 5 days for at least the average woman. So for the 2 to 5 days, this individual is in so much pain. Do you expect such an individual to even concentrate in class or at work, or to even deliver quality work at work? Of course not, right? And because they've been pushed to the wall with this pain, sometimes they'll opt to not show up. So what does this now encourage? Absenteeism. Does that limit what a girl and a woman can do? Yes, because they can't show up to work fully. They can't give themselves fully to their work or to their studies because they're in so much pain, right? Number two, when an individual is having a female individual, is having abnormally heavy or prolonged bleeding. This could be because of hormonal imbalance. Now, I'll marry this with heavy periods, which sometimes can even cause iron deficiency, anemia. And we all know when you have iron deficiency, you become dizzy, fatigued, weak, among other symptoms. So this individual is at work. You have so many files on your desk. You're expected to deliver on them promptly and perfectly, whereas you can't even see forward because you're dizzy. You're not dizzy, you have fatigue for days. If not that, you just have general body weakness. Of course, that limits what the individual put forward or put across as much as in regards to their work or their studies. 3, when there is excruciating pain or excessive bleeding. May her soul rest in eternal peace. I want us to think of Jambi Koikai. Jambi would go through very painful periods as because of endometriosis. how on earth, if we are to be just very realistic, would you expect someone who's already going through endometriosis as is, then now she has her monthly periods, you expect her to show up to work, to just deliver the most perfect work possible when this individual is in pain? Honestly, is it possible for them to even show up at work? Now, do you understand how dire this situation is, that it even limits your output, your presence in school or at work? I hope you do, and I hope you are following. Or maybe when an individual is suffering from fibroids, which are just lumpy growths in the uterus, you know. And lastly, I'd want us to understand that there's something called hormonal changes that are associated with the menstrual cycle, and they can be emotional or physical. Now, this is where the whole concept of she's moody comes in handy or comes into play. So the physical symptoms could be soreness, tender breast, headaches, sometimes even, deep swelling, muscle pain, and then emotional now anxiety or depression. So you're like a ball of hormones at this time of the month, and then you're required to come to work and act like a normal human being. If we're to be very honest, how possible is that? Close to impossible, right? I'm asking the questions and answering them myself, but it is a very insightful webinar. Moving on swiftly. I want us to understand how serious this is. So I even took my time to look for statistics. So up to 90% of women do not experience problems sufficient to disrupt daily functioning. Maybe it's a tender breast here that, and maybe sore feet, or, maybe a slight headache, but that's 90%. There's a 10% and growing, because since the Jambi situation came, to light, so many female individuals came forward talking about, I have endometriosis, I have dysmenorrhea, I have menstrual migraines. So I'd like to believe the percentage is actually higher than 10. So now, we talked about the hormonal changes which affect, the physical and the emotional well-being of a female individual during this time of the month. And I think we've been throwing around the term premenstrual symptom or syndrome, which could be, changes in appetite, headaches, depression, backache, bloating, diarrhea. Yes, guys, that's bad. Tender breast, irritability, anxiety, but then there's a percentage of women who actually go through something more severe than PMS. It's called premenstrual dysphoric disorder, PMD. So if I'm just feeling the tender breast and maybe irritability here and there, what they're going through is maybe 5 times more intense than what I'm going through. You see? So there's really a need to have a conversation about menstruation and when menstrual leave is important. So 20 to 30% of women experience premenstrual syndrome, and in this, 3 to 8% have very severe symptoms. Now, these people who have very severe symptoms are the ones who go through PMDD. And you can see that picture or symbol that talks about menstruation can affect all aspects of adult life, education, health, economics, dignity, participation. So that symbol just shows you that menstruation can in fact limit what women and girls can do. Okay. So we'll have a global context, maybe countries which have taken their time to sensitize their citizens on menstruation and maybe the concept of menstrual leave. Then they'll come into the continent and finally to Kenya. So we'll start with globally. Japan, since 1947, passed laws under Article 8 of the Labor Standards Law. And this one just says that when a woman is on her period, an employer shall not employ such a woman on such days when she's on her period. But the problem is, remember when you talked about the concept of paid and unpaid leave, the problem is those companies are not expected to pay extra if you decide as Wangeshi to show up to work when you're on your menses. They haven't brought out a policy for that. But at least they understand that during these 2 to 5 days, it could be so bad that this female employee will not, will not give her best, will not do her best at work. So let's have, some time off for them. And an employer is not allowed to expect that employee to be at work during this time of the month. I think that's just beautiful. Then there's Indonesia, and the Labor Act number 13 of 2003. It provides for 2 days of menstrual leave per month. And these are not additional leaves, just the menstrual leave. And I love how the menstrual leave is, just stands for itself. It's just very inspiring. And I think as a country, we need to borrow a leaf from Indonesia. And then there's South Korea, where female employees are entitled to menstrual leave as provided under Article 71 of the Labor Standards Law. I just love how there are policies in place and there are statutes to back up those paid policies. It just shows, a serious country as regards women's health. For the longest time, we keep saying women's rights are human rights, and indeed they are. And I love that Japan, Indonesia, South Korea, will come to see even Zambia in Africa have taken, this whole issue seriously. Okay. We have Taiwan, where it gives 3 days of menstrual leave period. And these ones are not calculated in the 30-day common sick leave. And I love how, just the menstrual leave, it operates on its own because it is a serious issue, as it is, on its own by itself, right? These 3 days do not come with half pay for women employee and exist the regulated 30 days. In Spain, since February 2023, it has provided for 3 to 5 days per month of paid menstrual leave to female workers. How amazing is that? So you're allowed to take your time to, cater for your menstrual health, for your reproductive health, and on top of that, it's actually paid. We really need to borrow a leaf from Spain, from Indonesia. We need to take this menstrual health thing seriously because it really is, right? In 2017, the Italian parliament introduced a menstrual leave policy, but it sparked debate and it never went through and wasn't enacted. Yeah. Then continentally, we have Zambia. It's the only African country that has actually integrated menstrual leave into its national policies. They do get a day off each month. In as much as, a day off isn't so very, I'd say, tangible, considering sometimes with different women experience these cramps or these very severe symptoms at different times of their, or at different days of these 5 days, but at least it's something, and I think if more attention and sensitization is channeled towards menstrual health, which definitely have more days off, right? Then nationally, we've not done so much as a country, and I think it's just very sad and just very discouraging. We've had a few stands here and there with the case of Gloria Oroba, which due to personal and professional reasons, I'll not delve into that. So I do feel like it was a stand, and it just really, it's just like laughing at the girls from poor families who struggle to access their menstrual supplies, or who are, or who come from societies which shun the topic of menstrual health or reproductive health. So as a country, we haven't done so much, despite the very many activists and female advocates, who've come forward as regards sexual health, reproductive health, menstrual health. But we do hope that policies, will be taken seriously, will be implemented, research will be carried out so that they can just see and understand how serious menstruation is and, how important it is for a female employee or a female student just have, at least 3 days off or at most 3 days off, just cater to their menstrual health, right? So the best practices for implementation, what are the best practices for implementation? So now we've reached a point where we're now saying as a country, we really haven't made so much progress. Actually, I don't think we made, no, we have made some progress, we'll make digital, but it's not, at the percentage that we'd like it to be, because we have so many girls and women from poor countries, from poor communities, who nobody actually cares if they have menstrual supplies, if their dignity has been respected and protected. Nobody actually cares. I remember there was a case, I think in 2019, where a female student happened to met herself, and she went through so much, uh, you know, the laughing and the shaming, that she actually committed suicide. So it actually is it's a very serious issue. I was just thinking to myself, if she was at home and the mom is taking care of her, and as a it's your family, maybe we'd still have the girl to date, but we don't, because at the time when her dignity was supposed to to be protected, and at a time when everyone ought to have known everything that regards mental health, so many people actually didn't, at least around her. And so now that pushed her to commit suicide. May her soul rest in eternal peace. So now, what are the best practices for implementation? One, a clear policy framework. We just need a formal policy that categorically and clearly outlines the entitlement to menstrual leave, its duration, for how long it's supposed to be, and how it can be accessed. And actually, if anything, if it can even be paid. So we need awareness and education. I've come to realize that we could be in 2024, but so many people don't understand how menstruation happens, what happens during that time of the month, how serious it is, if the pain is actually, it's an actual pain, if it's significant pain, so many people don't know. And I think it's the lack of awareness that makes people not take this issue seriously and not understand when they're asking for menstrual leave. I happened to come across a petition that was, it was started sometime last year, I think it was like 9th May 2023, by an individual. And the comments there, one comment read, I'll not sign for this petition to pass because I believe women will take advantage, or they'll take advantage, and it's not that serious a matter. And it really got me wondering, is it that you lack knowledge about how bad it can get, or that you just believe women are going to take advantage of something so, I didn't call it secret at this point, right? So there's lack of awareness and education. Then we need to understand, we need to put into place flexible leave options, right? So that an employee could decide whether she wants to take, the leave in advance, or to notify the employers, maybe a day before, just to promote flexibility, right? We'd also want to put in place that in as much as now we have the policy, right? But now do we uphold confidentiality? Okay. I think all requests as regard menstrual leave to be handled sensitively and confidentially. Because in a society, or maybe in a workplace where all matters sexual health, all conversations as regards that is shunned upon or maybe spoken about in hushed voices, it means even just one thing, okay, now we have the okay, this form allows for menstrual leave, but how will I talk to, let me say, my boss one week and tell him, I'm really going through it at this time of the month, I need the leave, and how sure am I that I'll not, here, when I come back, it will not, it will not have spread to the entire farm, that, she was very overwhelmed with her periods, she did not home, So we really need to uphold confidentiality as matters. Now, if we do have the policies in place, let's make sure there's confidentiality and a lot of sensitivity to it, right? And a supportive work environment. Let's have open discussions about menstruation, about how bad it could get, and why it's important to have the menstrual leave in a case where the periods are a bit too unbearable for the female individual. So, then monitoring and evaluation. I think the same way we usually have the flyers that ask you to, when you visit a restaurant and they ask you to note something down, do you like the food, do you like the customer service, all that, all that, all that. I think we should also have the same in, workplaces and also in schools. Let's gather feedback and understand if we've taken the female employees, mental health or sexual health into consideration. Maybe make necessary adjustments, right? When you collect data, you definitely see where, you ought to do better. That's basically what monitoring and evaluation is all about. Then there's integration with other benefits. Let's have menstrual leave integrated with other health-related benefits, Let's have it even maybe integrated in the, in the insurance schemes and all that, just to ensure that our female employees have been well taken care of, and that's just, yeah. And then legal compliance. Let's make sure that the policies align with existing labor laws and regulations in Kenya to safeguard employee rights and labor laws and health laws, right? Okay. You can all see the slide, and I hope I'm not too fast. I have a weakness of speaking a bit too fast. So that's how it was created, right? Okay. Let's talk about the benefits of menstrual leave. So now we've talked about menstruation, how serious it can get with all these conditions, the anemia, the PMS, the PMDD, the dysmenorrhea, the really heavy bleeding. Now we've, seen countries, it's so serious that even so several countries have incorporated menstrual leave into their policies. And now we can even borrow leaves, a leaf here and a leaf here. So now we have the best practices, right? You see now how we've been flowing. So now, can we talk about the benefits of menstrual leave? If as a country we decide to incorporate this, into our system, into our labor laws and our way of life, basically, how will it benefit us? One will be improved employee well-being and productivity. So you allowed Becky 2 days off because she was really going through it during that time of the month. When she comes back, she's even the more rejuvenated because now I'm feeling a lot better. I can deliver very well, right? Two, there's reduced absenteeism. Now that my farm allows me to take 3 days off when I'm on my period and when I'm really going through it during my period, why would I not show up to work? There's already a providence for it. So it reduces absenteeism. Three, it enhances workplace morale and loyalty. You actually sit and ask yourself, my employer really took into consideration my menstrual health, that he or she decided to set aside a few days, for me to just cater to my health. Just makes, he took me into consideration or she took me into consideration. It enhances your morale or improves your morale and your loyalty, right? And there's definitely better retention rate, knowing that your well-being is of importance to your employer, and not just the service that you bring to your employer. Okay. Then now, remember when we talked about, when I told you we'd come and talk about the challenges that affect this, that affect the whole concept of menstrual leave, or maybe these have just been, they have posed as barriers, and that's why we really can't move forward, especially the very many, the radical sensitization, the activists coming forward, why we really can't move forward. One, there's potential stigma and discrimination because there's not enough awareness or sufficient education on menstrual health. When you lack knowledge about something, you don't understand its workings or how it comes to be, right? Or its effects or its importance, right? So there's potential stigma and discrimination, or just being seen as less or as weak because it couldn't take the pain. So that's a challenge, and we've married it to the lack of awareness or the sufficient education, the lack of sufficient education. Two, there's a misuse of youth policies. If we're to be very honest and very realistic, not everybody is very honest. Okay, so some will decide, it's like I really don't feel like going to work today. Let me say I'm on my period, you see, so that I can now enjoy the 3 day off, the 3 day break. You see, there's misusing of the leave policies. Three, resistance from employers and certain industries, because they believe those 3 days that will not be at work, our sales will go down, and maybe you're the best in the game, So they're like, no, we will not let you go for those 3 days. So there's resistance, managerial resistance. Four, implementation variability, where there are differences in policy application across organizations, resulting in inconsistency and confusion. So Farm A gives these policy applications and implementation. Farm B gives this policy application and implementation. You see, there's so many inconsistencies, differences, and just, in totality results to confusion. And lastly, difficulty in integrating menstrual leave with existing sick leave or personal leave policies. And I think, in my opinion, I'd prefer for menstrual leave to just stand on its own, because menstruation it's a problem on its own, it's a topic on its own, right? Okay. Now I think I remember telling my viewers that we have a couple of misconceptions. One, somehow people believe that it is unnecessary, that menstrual pain can't be that much, it can't be that painful. Our mothers have, experienced it, even our grandmothers, when one is doing missing work in school. It's unnecessary, it's just too much, it's a misconception. But now that we've understood that it could become so bad that there's even a term for it, there's even PMDD. The normal premenstrual symptoms that we're used to could get so bad, so severe, and statistics actually show that there's an actual percentage that suffer from this. Now, is it unnecessary? So it isn't, so it's a misconception. Menstrual leave promotes gender bias. In that you'll be seen as weak if you decide to take a few days off because of very painful periods or very heavy bleeding, or maybe you already have some existing, issues like endometriosis, fibroids, PCOS, right? Or emotionally you're not okay, maybe you usually have anxiety disorder or depression disorder, so now it becomes 100-fold worse when you're having this PMS, right? So you're likely to be seen as weak. But really, are you weak? We said it's a natural process. It's really beyond us. So, if I'm in pain, then I'm in pain, and there's nothing to be, there's nothing to shame you with, right? Or there's nothing to be afraid of, right? It's an excuse for absenteeism. Well, some may take advantage of it, but like in this day and age, when so many people are going through it, and so many people have, very different, very various and severe and, serious reproductive health problems, really, I think it would be very wrong and just, shameless, if I may, to use it as an excuse for absenteeism. And luckily, it only affects a minority. As you've seen, it doesn't, and actually, as the days go by, the percentages actually increase. So, having that in mind, what is our future outlook? What does it look like for us in the future? I think if we were to incorporate already where we are with so many women coming forward with their reproductive health issues and so many, coming forward as women and girls who go through dysmenorrhea, endometriosis, PMDD, PMS. I think the awareness on its own, is quite significant. And if we were to now implement the policies, in a more stringent manner and more seriously, I think as a country we'd really, make progress as regards menstrual leave, right? And I think in that light, we also need to address, the stigma that comes with it. Of course, the misconception, because I know somehow this day and age, somebody still believes there's nothing like PMS. There's nothing like you're having emotional, changes because you're on your period, right? So I think we just need to remove the cultural stigma, do a lot of sensitization, a lot of, educating people to ensure there is effective implementation and acceptance. But overall, there's potential for positive change as discussions around women's rights continue to evolve. And a reminder, women's rights are in fact human rights and should be taken very seriously. That is it for my presentation. Thank you so much for taking your time to listen in. If there are questions, we'll now allow you to, maybe type. I don't know if there are any going once, going twice. I don't think there are any questions. So thank you so much for taking your time to listen. And let's take this issue seriously. Let's understand why it's important that we have this policy enacted and, implemented, and have employers and even schools and institutions, this day and age. So thank you so much and have a beautiful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky, for that well insightful presentation. So with that, I think we're going to bring it to an end, but I'm sure right now all of us have come up to the place where we appreciate the need for such a policy or laws when it comes to the health and the welfare of women. I hope all of us will take the front line in championing this conversation in whatever circles you're in. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we bring this session to an end, and we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Thank you so much and have a good afternoon.